the name of our topic is Forest and Wildlife Resources. In this video, we will be learning about the following things. First, about the condition of biological diversity in India. Second, about the role of International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, that is IUCN. Third, we will discuss about the Himalayan Yew. Fourth, we will talk about the threat to forest. Then we will discuss about the conservation of forest and wildlife in India. Then we are going to discuss about the initiatives that are being taken to protect the wildlife. And then we are going to discuss about Project Tiger. Then about the types and distribution of forest and wildlife resources. And lastly, we will talk about the role of community in conservation. So let us start. First, we will be discussing about the condition of biological diversity in India. So, India is one of the world's richest countries in terms of its vast array of biological diversity. Some estimates suggest that at least 10% of India's recorded wild flora and 20% of its mammals are on the threatened list. Many of these would now be categorized as critical, that is, on the verge of extinction, like the cheetah, pink-headed duck, mountain quail, forest spotted owlet, and plants like Maduca insignis, that is a wild variety of mahua, and Hubardia heptaneuron, which is a species of grass. Now, what is the condition of forest in India? The dimensions of deforestation in India are staggering. The forest and tree cover in the country is estimated at 79.42 million hectare, which is 24.16% of the total geographical area. That is, dense forest is 12.2%, open forest is 9.14%, and mangrove is at 0.14%. According to the State of Forest Report 2015, the dense forest cover has increased by 3,775 square kilometers since 2013. However, this apparent increase in the forest cover is due to the conservation measures, management interventions, and plantations, etc. by the different agencies. Now let us discuss about the Asiatic cheetah. The world's fastest land mammal, that is the cheetah, is a unique and specialized member of the cat family and can move at a speed of 112 km per hour. The cheetah is often mistaken for a leopard. Its distinguishing marks are the long teardrop-shaped lines on each side of the nose from the corner of its eyes to its mouth. Prior to the 20th century, cheetahs were widely distributed throughout Africa and Asia. And today, the Asian cheetah is nearly extinct due to a decline of available habitat and prey. The species was declared extinct in India long back in 1952. Now, after discussing about the biological diversity in India, let us talk about the role of the IUCN, that is, International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. Based on the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, we can classify a few things. A. Normal species, which are species whose population levels are considered to be normal for their survival, such as cattle, sal, pine, rodents, etc. Then we have the endangered species. Now these are the species which are in danger of extinction. The survival of such species is difficult if the negative factors that have led to their decline in the population continue to operate. The examples of such species are the black buck, crocodile, Indian wild ass, Indian rhino, lion-tailed macaque, sangai, that is brow-antlered deer in Manipur, etc. Then we have the vulnerable species. Now these are the species whose population has declined to levels from where it is likely to move into the endangered category in the near future, provided the negative factors continue to operate. The examples of such species are the blue sheep, Asiatic elephant, Gangetic dolphin, etc. Then again we have a different category, that is of rare species. Rare species are the ones with small population which may move into the endangered or vulnerable category if the negative factors are affecting them, which continues to operate. The examples of such species are the Himalayan brown bear, wild Asiatic buffalo, desert fox, and hornbill. Then again we have an endemic species. Endemic species are the ones which are only found in some particular areas, usually isolated by natural or geographical barriers. Examples of such species are the Andaman teal, Nicobar pigeon, Andaman wild pig, mithun in Arunachal Pradesh. And lastly, we have the category of extinct species. Now, extinct species are the ones which are not found after searches of known or likely areas where they may occur. A species may be extinct from a local area, region, country, continent, or even the entire earth. Examples of such species are the Asiatic cheetah, pink-head duck. So this was about the role of the IUCN. Now let us talk about the Himalayan yew. The Himalayan yew is a medicinal plant which is found in various parts of Himachal Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh. A chemical compound called taxol is extracted from the bark, needles, twigs and roots of this tree, and it has been successfully used to treat some cancers. However, the drug is now the best-selling anti-cancer drug in the world. The species is under great threat due to overexploitation. In the last 1 decade, thousands of yew trees have dried up in various parts of Himachal Pradesh and the Arunachal Pradesh. Now let us discuss about the threat to the forest. The greatest damage inflicted on Indian forest was during the colonial period due to the expansion of railways, agriculture, commercial and scientific forestry, and the mining activities. Even after independence, agricultural expansion continues to be one of the major causes of depletion of forest resources. Between 1951 and 1980, according to the Forest Survey of India, over 26,200 square kilometers of forest area was converted into agricultural land all over India. Substantial parts of the tribal belts, especially in the northeastern and central India, have been deforested or degraded by shifting cultivation, which is also called jhum, a type of slash and burn agriculture. Large-scale development projects have also contributed significantly to the loss of forest. Since 1951, over 5,000 square kilometers of forest was cleared for river valley projects, and the clearing of forest is still continuing with projects like the Narmada Sagar project in Madhya Pradesh, which would inundate around 40,000 hectares of forest. Now, apart from these activities, another factor which leads to deforestation is mining. The Buxa Tiger Reserve in West Bengal is seriously threatened by the ongoing dolomite mining, and it has disturbed the natural habitat of many species and even blocked the migration route of several others, including the great Indian elephant. Many foresters and the environmentalists hold the view that the greatest degrading factors behind the depletion of forest resources are grazing and the fuel wood collection. Hence, habitat destruction, hunting, poaching, overexploitation, environmental pollution, poisoning, and the forest fires are factors which have led to the decline in India's biodiversity. However, there are other important causes of environmental destruction, and that is the unequal access, inequitable consumption of resources, and differential sharing of responsibility for environmental well-being. Overpopulation in third world countries is often cited as the cause of environmental degradation. However, an average American consumes 40 times more resources than an average Somalian. Similarly, the richest 5% of Indian society probably cause more ecological damage because of the amount they consume than the poorest 25%. So, we should note a couple of things, and that is, first, the destruction of forest and wildlife is not just a biological issue. Second, the biological loss is strongly correlated with the loss of cultural diversity. Third, such losses have increasingly marginalized and impoverished many indigenous and other forest-dependent communities who directly depend on various components of the forest and wildlife for food, drink, medicine, culture, spirituality, etc. Fourth, within the poor, women are affected more than the men. Fifth, in many societies, women bear the major responsibility of collection of fuel, fodder, water, and other basic subsistence needs. As these resources are depleted, the drudgery over women increases, and sometimes they have to walk for more than 10 kilometers to collect these resources. This causes serious health problems for women and negligence of home and children because of the increased work hours, which often has serious social implications as well. Sixth, the indirect impact of degradation, such as severe drought or deforestation, induced floods, etc., also hits the poorest the hardest. Seventh, poverty in these cases is a direct outcome of environmental destruction. And eighth, the forest and wildlife are vital to the quality of life and environment in the subcontinent. It is imperative to adapt to sound forest and wildlife conservation strategies. Therefore, we should now discuss about the conservation of forest and wildlife in India. Conservation in the background of rapid decline in wildlife population and forestry has now become very essential. Hence, there is a need to conserve forest and wildlife as A. Conservation preserves the ecological diversity and our life support systems, that is water, air and soil. Second, it also preserves the genetic diversity of plants and animals for better growth of species and breeding. For example, in agriculture, we are still dependent on the traditional crop varieties. And third, fisheries too are heavily dependent on the maintenance of aquatic biodiversity. Therefore, we should now have a look at the initiatives that are being taken to protect the wildlife. In the 1960s and 1970s, conservationists demanded a national wildlife protection program. Hence, the Indian Wildlife Protection Act was implemented in 1972 with various provisions for protecting the habitats. An All India list of protected species was also published. The thrust of the program was towards protecting the remaining population of certain endangered species by banning hunting, giving legal protection to their habitats, and restricting trade in wildlife. Subsequently, central and many state governments established national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. The central government also announced several projects for protecting specific animals which were gravely threatened, including the tiger, the one-horned rhinoceros, the Kashmir stag or hangul, the three types of crocodiles, that is, freshwater crocodile, saltwater crocodile, and the gharial, then the Asiatic lion and others. Most recently, the Indian elephant, black buck, the great Indian bustard, and the snow leopard, etc., have been given full or partial legal protection against hunting and trade throughout India. The conservation projects are now focusing on biodiversity rather than a few of its components. There is now a more intensive search for different conservation measures. Increasingly, even insects are beginning to find a place in the conservation planning. In the notification under the Wildlife Act of 1980 and 1986, several hundred butterflies, moths, beetles, and one dragonfly have been added to the list of protected species. Now let us discuss about one such project, that is Project Tiger. So what was Project Tiger all about? So tiger, as we know, is one of the key wildlife species in the faunal web. In 1973, the authorities realized that the tiger population had dwindled to 1,827 from an estimated 55,000 at the turn of the century. The major threats to tiger population are numerous, such as poaching for trade, shrinking habitat, depletion of prey-based species, growing human population, etc. The trade of tiger skins and the use of their bones in traditional medicines, especially in the Asian countries, have left the tiger population on the verge of extinction. Since India and Nepal provide habitat to about 2/3 of the surviving tiger population in the world, these two nations became the prime targets for poaching and the illegal trading. Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand, Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, Bandhavgarh National Park in Madhya Pradesh, Sariska Wildlife Sanctuary in Rajasthan, Manas Tiger Reserve in Assam, and Periyar Tiger Reserve in Kerala are some of the important tiger reserves of India. Now, after discussing about the conservations and the initiatives that are taken for this conservation of wildlife, now let us move on to talk about the types and distribution of forest and wildlife resources. In India, much of its forest and wildlife resources are either owned or managed by the government through the Forest Department or by other government departments. These are classified under the following categories. First, the reserved forest. Now, more than half of the total forest land has been declared as reserved forest. They are regarded as the most valuable as far as the conservation of forest and wildlife resources are concerned. Second category is that of the protected forest. Almost 1/3 of the total forest area is the protected forest as declared by the Forest Department. This forest land is protected from any further depletion. And the third category is the unclassed forest, which are the forest and wastelands belonging to both the government and the private individuals and the communities. Now, we should note a couple of things here. First, reserved and protected forests are also referred to as permanent forest estates maintained for the purpose of producing timber and other forest produce and for protective reasons. Second, Madhya Pradesh has the largest area under the permanent forest, constituting 75% of its total forest area. Third, Jammu and Kashmir, Andhra Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and Maharashtra have large percentages of reserved forest of its total forest area, whereas Bihar, Haryana, Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Odisha and Rajasthan have a bulk of it under protected forest. Fourth, all northeastern states and parts of Gujarat have a very high percentage of their forest as unclassed forest, which are managed by the local communities. Now, it is important to discuss about the role of the communities in conservation. So, conservation strategies are not new in our country. We know that in India, forests are also home to some of the traditional communities. In some areas of India, local communities are struggling to conserve these habitats along with the government officials, recognizing that only this will secure their own long-term livelihood. In Sariska Tiger Reserve, Rajasthan, villagers have fought against mining by citing the Wildlife Protection Act. In many areas, villagers themselves are protecting the habitats and explicitly rejecting the government involvement. The inhabitants of 5 villages in the Alwar district of Rajasthan have declared 1200 hectares of forest as the Bhairodev Dakav Sanctuary, declaring their own set of rules and regulations which do not allow hunting and are protecting the wildlife against any outside encroachments. In fact, the famous Chipko movement in the Himalayas has not only successfully resisted the deforestation in several areas, but it has also shown that community afforestation with indigenous species can enormously be successful. Attempts to revive the traditional conservation methods or developing new methods of ecological farming are now widespread. Farmers and citizens groups like the Beej Bachao Andolan in Tehri and the Navdanya have shown that adequate levels of diversified crop production without the use of any synthetic chemicals are possible and even economically viable. In India, the Joint Forest Management, that is JFM program, furnishes a good example for involving the local communities in the management and the restoration of degraded forest. The program has been in formal existence since 1988, when the state of Odisha passed the first resolution for joint forest management. JFM depends on the formation of local, that is village institutions, that undertake protection activities mostly on degraded forest land managed by the Forest Department. In return, the members of these communities are entitled to intermediary benefits like non-timber forest producers and share in the timber which is harvested by the successful protection. The Mundas and the Santhal of Chota Nagpur region worship Mahua and Kadamba trees, and the tribals of Odisha and Bihar worship the tamarind and mango trees during the weddings. To many of us, peepal and banyan trees are considered sacred. Also, in and around Bishnoi villages in Rajasthan, herds of black buck, nilgai, and peacocks can be seen as an integral part of the community, that nobody can harm them.